We also heard testimony from a former employee of the Department of Homeland Security, Phil Haney, that in October 2009, more than 800 Customs and Border Patrol documents were ordered modified, scrubbed, or deleted to remove references to jihad or the Muslim Brotherhood or other similar references.
Between these two dates, 2008 and 2016, came what I call the first Great Purge, when I was ordered by the Department of Homeland Security headquarters to modify, a euphemism, removing all linking information out of approximately 820 text subject records in our law enforcement system that almost exclusively had to do with Muslim Brotherhood network here in the United States. I was told to remove all unauthorized references to terrorism, no more text records, no more research.
In 2011, the group Muslim Advocates sent a letter to the Obama administration claiming the federal government had somehow become infected with, quote, false and highly offensive training materials about Muslims and Islam, and demanding that, quote, such bigoted and distorted materials be purged. And I would note that was their word, not mine. Purged. And is also advocating for the creation of an interagency task force to address this problem. Current CIA Director John Brennan, then the President's Homeland Security Advisor, agreed to create such a task force and claimed that the federal government had indeed produced, quote, offensive training that urgently needed to be dealt with in order to, quote, reflect the vision that the President has put forward. Should it really be the top concern of counterterrorism whether their efforts, quote, offend anyone rather than whether they work and keep Americans safe?
At least 6 individuals with known affiliations to the Muslim Brotherhood front groups were appointed to the Countering Violent Extremism CVE Working Group, which was convened under the authority of the Homeland Security Advisory Council.
Hamas, after all, is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood and is a terrorist organization that openly celebrates murdering women and children. The Obama administration, of course, has declined to appear and explain its policies. In November 2011, the Department of Homeland Security released its Domestic Terrorism and Homegrown Extremism Lexicon that included anarchist extremists, animal rights extremists, environmental extremists, and racist skinhead extremists. Yet somehow, radical Islamic extremists nowhere mentioned. Even worse, in March 2012, under pressure from advocacy groups, the FBI purged 876 documents from its training materials at the behest of 3 unidentified quote-unquote experts.
But in September of 2012, what I call the second Great Purge, when the administration removed 67 linking records out of that case that had direct ties to the terrorist attacks that we've seen recently.
At that hearing, we heard testimony that described a systematic effort if one compares, for example, the 9/11 Commission report. The word jihad appears in that report 126 times. The word Muslim appears in that report 145 times. The word Islam appears in that report 322 times. And yet, since that 9/11 Commission report, different policies have come into effect. And as a matter of systematic policy, those terms are no longer allowed to be used in this administration. The FBI counterterrorism lexicon uses the word jihad 0 times. The National Intelligence Strategy of 2009 uses the word jihad 0 times. The Strategic Implementation Plan to Prevent Violent Extremism of 2011 uses the word 0 times. The National Intelligence Strategy in 2014 uses the word 0 times. And what concerns me, and I believe should concern the Department of Homeland Security, is that because of this effort, scrubbing your law enforcement materials of any acknowledgement of radical Islamic terrorism, when you see the red flags of radical Islamic terrorism, you do not follow up on them effectively, and we have terrorist attack after terrorist attack after terrorist attack that could have been prevented but for this administration's willful blindness. U.S. officials, he argued, quote, are prohibited from engaging in debates about Islam. That's more than a little troubling. Are government officials, under the terms of this administration's policy, prohibited from debating anything? This year alone, the Obama administration has twice purged mentions of ISIS and Islamic terrorism from highly significant public records. One involving French President Hollande's remarks about the Paris terror attacks, and the other involving the terrorist 9/11 call during the horrific Orlando attack. The administration was forced to abruptly reverse course when the public outcry became too great. Around the same time, the Homeland Security Advisory Council was admonishing DHS personnel in a report about countering violent extremism to reject, quote, religiously charged terminology such as jihad, sharia, takfir, and ummah. Does anyone notice a trend here? A consistent effort by this administration to scrub any reference to radical Islamic terrorism. We cannot combat and defeat radical Islamic terrorism without acknowledging it exists and directing our resources to stop